Welcome to this Epic Life podcast, where we explore the connection between building a conscious life and building a conscious team or a conscious business. We also break down 3 powerful permissions with our guests. These would be the permission to chill or find stillness, the permission to feel all the feels or embrace our full humanity, all the emotions and the powerful resilience that comes from doing just that. And finally, the permission to glow in the dark. I'm offsite with a couple hundred leaders this week exploring that very thing. I will be your host. My name is Christopher Carter. You may call me KC. I'm a coach for founders and executives and meditation teacher for organizations. And now let's meet this week's guest. Every once in a while, we bump into people who somehow earn a great living and build a great life simply by being themselves. If life is a journey of self-discovery, self-acceptance, and ultimately leveraging our power of being ourselves, these people don't waste too much time in discovery and acceptance because they have too much impact to create by virtue of their being. My friend Evan La Ruffa is one of these people. If the guy isn't installing the craziest, hippest, and most cutting-edge art for corporate spaces, he is evangelizing the value of art to executive leaders of brands like Adidas. Evan has one of those vibes you can feel a block away before you get there. He's covered in tats, rocks some heavy-gauged earwear, and yet he's so genuinely joyful that he can hang with anyone. Evan La Ruffa is the founder of I Paint My Mind, an organization that transforms people and spaces by connecting artists, businesses, and communities through art. He currently serves as the executive director and lead curator. Evan is so passionate about connecting artists to corporate spaces and then using the revenue to give back to schools and community centers, you just get the feeling that the guy would be doing this whether or not he was getting paid. The most inspiring aspect of his business model is that getting paid is essential to funding its ecosystem of giving back. Some quick stats on I Paint My Mind. Over the last 6 years, they've amassed an incredible collection of over 1,100 pieces of original art, which they have exhibited in over 65 businesses and communities. You can browse their collection at ipaintmymind.org. If you're looking for creative ways to monetize your passion while giving back to a greater cause, you'll want to hear this. This conversation is also packed with ways to engage corporate partners and clients. We'll cover in detail how he built an organization around his passion and what he's learned from speaking to so many corporate buyers over the years. We start with the lessons he took from his parents that gave him permission to glow in the dark. Lessons like these from a humble innovator and outlier of that snobby art scene are what we want to pass on to our own kids. And another thing that I and so many of my coaching clients can relate to about Evan is that he does all of this while being a very present husband and father. He and his wife Lindsay are raising their family of 4 in North Chicago. It's hard to tell where the art of Evan's work and the art of his family begin and end. Please enjoy this conversation on art, aesthetics, family, and passion with Evan La Ruffa. Thank you so much for joining us on this Epic Life podcast.
Awesome to be here.
So we always kick off with the 3 permissions as access to our highest expression. These are the permissions to chill, the permission to feel all the feels or embrace our full humanity, and finally, permission to glow in the dark. You could interpret that however you wish. Do any of these resonate with you today? Or how would you interpret what it means to give yourself permission to chill, feel the feels, or glow in the dark?
Glow in the dark is definitely the first one that resonates for me. I think the piece, I think everybody is kind of looking for permission to glow in the dark. So I love that you came at it from that angle. I think a lot of the times we buffer who we are because we feel we need to play a certain role or be a certain thing in a certain space. And I think a lot of the work that I've been doing over the last year with part of that with yourself, I think has been around unleashing that kind of top realm of everything we can do, everything we can be, by not trying to kind of cover up the glow in the dark a little bit or kind of shade it or kind of protect people from it. And so, yeah, I'm actually trying to remind myself more and more to glow in the dark. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, yeah, let's jump right into that. I'm so impressed with what you've continued to build with I Pay My Mind. So why don't you tell me a little bit about kind of where you are now and kind of where you started with it? Because I feel like the vision has expanded greatly.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I think I Paint My Mind is a perfect case study for inspiration coming in one type of way and being open to that changing over time and kind of testing and seeing how things best resonate. But absolutely, it hasn't been one of these things where it was this like fully formed realization. And then like you kind of zoom straight to that fully formed thing. It's obviously been the product of a bunch of iterating and being open to new things. And
one of the reasons I was so geeked about having you on the show is that there's few of us who are crazy enough to just do something completely unprecedented. You know, like there's no manual. There's really no comp for it. Like a comparable.
Sure.
It's very, very unique. Like I can't think of one thing like it. So
yeah,
explain to people what I mean by that.
Sure. So I think so. I Paint My Mind really was the seed of just a bit of inspiration. I've always been a writer and a curator. I was always the guy who was like telling you about that show that you should have gone to, or the latest record, or some visual art that was had inspired me.
Like a hipster, if you will.
I've got tattoos and manicured facial hair. No, just kidding. The tattoo part is
Did
true.
You ride a unicycle here?
Yeah, exactly. A 12-foot tall unicycle. Yeah, I did. It's parked out front. But no, so it was just really just about kind of putting a few pieces together, inherently being a curator and a writer, and kind of the main overlay for my life being about making the world a better place, just being interested in new solutions and how structures and communities and support systems work for people or don't work for people. And so, yeah, I Paint My Mind was really just a blog on Blogger back in the day, 2008. And you remember Blogger, that little logo, the beginning of
I was more of a Blogspot guy.
I was, it happens, But in any case, I started publishing a lot and really digging into curation and being able to jump down these different internet rabbit holes as far as different cool things that people were making. So we started, I say we all the time, even though at that point it was definitely just me. Yeah. I was just writing about things that inspired me, and the kind of the ethos around it was uncompromised curation. That it was the only reason that I was telling you about it was that I thought it was totally rad.
Yeah.
Right? There's no extra filigree or like brought to you by or powered by nonsense, right? And so, yeah, it was something that was really just a space to kind of share the things that I was into, kind of grew into this hybrid of platform for artists, ways for businesses to engage with those artists, and then mobilizing all of that for really awesome community give back that helps put creative resources in communities that, unfortunately have less and less to work with. So, I kind of took things that felt kind of more inherent as far as like the writing and the curating and the community work, and kind of tried to see what that Rubik's Cube could become. And I think, if I kind of look back, there have definitely been different kind of pivots or turning points that have kind of opened up new ways. And I just can't say enough in favor of being open to those things evolving, to projects changing, to, the ethos is still the same. But yeah, kind of the model that we have as far as paying artists directly, engaging businesses to see that value in what the artists are creating, and really making this whole give back for communities. So turning art and businesses into free art exhibitions and curriculum for underserved schools, parks, and libraries. I think that's the kind of unique thing as far as being to turn art into impact.
Yeah, a lot of questions come up around this. And what I'm most fascinated by is kind of who you needed to become in the process, because it's one thing to be unapologetically publishing some, this is me, I'll tell you what's rad, and nobody's listening. It's like crickets.
Sure, totally.
But as you grew it and you realize there's not only an audience for it, but there's a corporate market for it. There's a spot for it. It's becoming line items on budgets at big organizations, and it's kind of your duty or your mission to connect these seemingly disparate parties. Like artists, give them access to corporate dollars and corporate space, but then make those corporations, give them more soul, give them more. So what qualifies you to be the connector for those two communities?
Who aren't I?
Yeah.
Is just kind of the backbone to it, right? I think.
And maybe a better way to frame it is like what in your experience kind of gave you because this is what I want to give people access to, is like, what in your experience gave you like the chutzpah or the confidence to walk into these corporations and say, you need some kick-ass art on your walls?
For sure. It's interesting because I think questions like that, I feel like I tend to always kind of go back to my beginning, which was just being loved up super incredibly as a kid and feeling like that's absolutely, my platform, my basis for being a bit audacious. Or like thinking that I can do something far out that hasn't been done before.
Because you'd still be loved.
Yeah, I'm not trying to reconcile that piece, right? It's kind of just like...
So blessed, man.
Incredibly blessed. Like it almost makes me cry every single time I talk about it.
It's a beautiful thing.
No, it really is, and obviously, being a father now hugely shapes the way I think about being a dad and being on the other side of that equation. But without going too in depth, I think it really is about that basis in just totally being loved, being confident in who I am, having the same kind of insecurities that we all do as people, right? Like, is this okay? Am I good enough? I mean, there's all of that kind of micro self chatter that we have, but really just feeling confident in who I was in a very root kind of essential way. And then I think something that has always kind of, the curator piece and the art piece is something that I consider the most learned piece of my kind of formula. That like the love was the basis. I've learned about technique and art and curation and presentation and value over the last 10 years. But I think the other piece that kind of caps or like bookends that, that love that has supported me so much in my life is kind of always being focused on new solutions. Just like
discovery, curiosity.
I just love building new ways of doing things.
Yeah.
Like better ways of doing things, more impactful, connective, creative ways of doing things.
They're win-wins for everybody.
I mean, the white space is there for me, right? Like I see, for me personally, like I don't know if there are a ton of other options within things that have already been done. Just as far as room for growth, room for creativity. One thing with I Paint My Mind that we really love as far as the structure that we set up, our Shared Walls Rotating Art program is a huge driver of these connections with businesses and communities. But our name of the organization is I Paint My Mind, and the Shared Walls program is a program. So like sub to that, right? And then we're always open to this open creative space over here that is like, what is the next creative way that we can tie people together, show that our best interest is a mutual thing, and do it in a creative way that gets people excited about their life,
I definitely hear a bigger mission in there where, art is the current medium and the current connection point or the currency between these different communities.
Yeah.
But there's also it seems to be part of your thing to make sure that everybody either self-actualizes or gets the benefit from everybody else. Like there's like an elevation thing happening. There's a consciousness to it.
Hugely. And it's wild to me because engaging in some of more of these business spaces, you kind of hear folks saying things like, well, millennials really care about giving back, as if it's this like fucking revelation. Like we just figured out that people care about each other's best interests. It's like, it kind of is nuts.
Yeah.
In our families, in our close friendships, like it's so easy to know that we care about the other person. But it's interesting to me just that like, there's kind of this like aha moment that seems to be happening in this like larger social context, which is like, the coolest thing is caring. And it's like caring was cool before corporations had the data to prove it.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
But like, if we can develop new models for just engaging people on a level that is personal, that is like primal, that like holy shit moment that we have when we see someone just do a sick bass lick, right? Or any other type of creative inspiration. I definitely consider it a privilege to be able to be part of creating more of these inspiring moments, whether in a business space or a school that needs support. But yeah, it's just interesting because I think in a just very elementary way, we all know that it feels good to help each other out. And so I don't know if we need more reason than that. I never really have. I think that's kind of why I do this work. Like I'm not necessarily looking for the data, just like the feels prove it to me.
I've told you this before. Your life seems to look like a piece of art. Like your apartment is.
It's actually one of the sweetest compliments I've ever gotten. So I appreciate that very much.
It's totally real. I mean, you couldn't design a better sitcom set that looks more hip or more cool or more, better food or cuter family. I mean, it is like you hit all the levels.
We'll take it, man.
The vinyl, all that stuff. What did your parents do with you specifically to make you this thing?
Yeah,
by this thing, I mean this giant
air quotes thing.
this heart with legs, or this.
Yeah.
But you see art. But you see art in everything.
Yeah.
And I think that you see expression in everything.
Sure.
And you see curation in everything.
Yes.
And, from it starts out in the hallway, all of your shoes leading to the door. The palette of shoes are remarkable.
Pretty dope sneakers.
It's a pretty dope sneaks. Yeah. But what do you think it was that your parents did for you that you remember that you take into these places?
Yeah, it's interesting as I kind of think about more of why I do this work. I've kind of honed in on some of those, I think, inspiring creative moments that I had as a young person that proved kind of what you're saying, right? That there's curation, everything, that there's aesthetics, there's this kind of poetry that happens in creative works. And I think a couple of those experiences were having the privilege to spend time in Europe as a young kid and seeing, museums like the Louvre and El Prado, and seeing original Dali works as like a 10-year-old, and just being like, holy shit. Like, that is really far out. Like, I didn't even know that was possible. And I really think that kind of sequence of like, wow, I didn't know that was possible, and now I'm really excited about what I might do next.
Yeah.
Is so uncanny. Like, it's just a really important and really, I think, engaging and empowering kind of experience. And I realize there's a form of addiction to those types of experiences.
So it sounds like you were exposed to some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And what do you think you took from your parents that you employ with your own kids in terms of helping them see themselves?
Well, I mean, so this from the last question kind of dovetails into this one. One of those other experiences was like seeing my dad cry at Les Miserables. Like going to see theater with my dad and like him being so moved. I mean, the whole damn thing, right? But like, yeah, I mean, like, it was, so that kind of ties in as far as that being, theater, visual arts, music, all being things that I realized as a young person shaped me a lot. But as far as like my parents and kind of creating the container for me, I think that's another, and I always come back to my dad when talking about stuff like this as well. This my father's a feeling man. Like, he has always been, very in touch with his feelings, and so whether tears or joy or love, I think all those things were like readily accessible from a male perspective for me. And so I always talk to, in a kind of like offhand joking way, kind of talk about having like a Euro dad who liked theater and talking about his, right. And my dad's from Argentina. I grew up in a very European culture. It's interesting. I think that I always kind of saw someone who was open to that side of himself. I think, that kind of openness emotionally is definitely something that I've learned from them. And I think, quite frankly, from my mom's side, that activism and community is essential.
I love that you channel it into aesthetics because the world is a pretty dark, weird place at the moment.
It can be.
Right.
It sure can.
And there needs to be bright spots and cool stuff to look at and stuff that kind of takes you on a journey.
Sure.
How do you think about aesthetics, or curation? Like what comes up for you when it's like, somebody wants to, up level the vibe at their place or their space?
Sure. I mean, I think one of those things is, as a curator, I really try to make it a lot more accessible for the folks that we work with, as far as like your opinion, whatever it is great. I think there's a lot of snotty, square rim glass, gala event, Michigan Avenue stuff, red rope, you can't come in here stuff around art specifically.
It's like the more sophisticated version of like the snotty ass record store guys that judge you for buying whatever.
Just way more expensive, right?
Exactly.
No, and I think like that, that kind of elite art world stuff, from my standpoint, has done art itself a huge injustice, because I think it keeps people out when really kind of our mission at I Pay My Mind is about including as many people as possible. That the fine art world has kind of parlayed their proximity to this stuff into like exclusion and we know better than you. And when I Pay My Mind works with, Adidas or DocuSign of any of our other great clients, for us, it's really a dialogue. We talk about co-curation. That part of our job is to reflect our client, to reflect our partner, to reflect the community that we work with. So if I go to a school on the West Side that's 60% Latino, like we're not going to go put in a bunch of like old dead white guy stuff, because it has no context.
Right. Cultural relevancy.
Right. Yeah. Because, context is everything from what you're into to who you are, to where you live, to where you're from, to who your friends are. And I think, we're really proud of the way that we create more inroads for people, whether they're in the business community or in the public at large, to engage with stuff that they might have been intimidated to engage with in the past. And, there's, whether it's the nonprofit sector, which we're a part of, or the fine art sector, there's plenty of limiting beliefs that I think really is more about preserving people's roles in hierarchies than it is actually like creating connections with art lovers or helping communities. And that's the kind of stuff that really gets me going, because it's so clear to me that things like art speak to all of us if only we would just look for that way of doing it. And I think a lot of stuff is like, everyone who like, a lot of folks that I talk to, like, I don't know anything about art. I'm not the art guy. And I'm just like, chill out. It's all good. Like, even though you're coming at me like I'm the art guy, I still think your opinion matters. And I'm not here to just impose and tell you what's cool. I have opinions, and we have a collection of reflecting a bunch of artists, plenty of which I would love to connect people with. But I think it not necessarily democratic, but inclusive is really how we try to go about it. That it really be a conversation and a collaboration. And so, whether talking to companies about art for their space, art rentals or murals or anything else, or those same projects in community spaces, for us, it's really important that, it be a dialogue as opposed to an imposition.
Yeah. How do you think about engagement when you go, we've talked on and off throughout the years about how to approach an Adidas, or,
sure,
for you to put on a suit and go speak at a big event with your plug piercings and stuff. Like, how do you think about, or how do you approach engagement, for people that want to get into, more of a corporate budgets, corporate work, but still be themselves?
I mean, I think kind of understanding how I fit best, or how I could, be most authentic, has been a process. I actually take a lot of pride in being accessible, being someone that folks can talk to, that there aren't walls up around when it comes to, communication or trying to work with a partner or anything like that. But back to the glow in the dark thing, right? For me, and especially in the last year, it's become more and more obvious to me that really the like buttoned up suit and tie thing just isn't me, and that trying to do that is kind of inherently inauthentic and probably does me a disservice anyway.
Like putting on a costume or?
Sure. And I mean, there's a couple ways to go with that, right? Like, yeah, I'm Ev, I'm accessible, I'm the business meets community art guy, but you can't walk in flip-flops.
Yeah, for sure.
Being practical, understanding what makes sense, but also not putting the cover over the glow in the dark. I think the more that I'm just myself, the better things go.
I heard this great quote recently, it was the guy, this amazing African-American gentleman who is a correspondent for the Oscars, who wore like a massive ball gown. I don't know if you remember this dude, but his quote was, his grandmother told him, "Don't dress for the job you have, dress for the job you want." You know,
I dig that.
So he wants to be the fabulous correspondent at the Oscars, or so it was. Always kind of like, yeah. So like as aesthetics apply to your wardrobe, what would you when you think about where you want I paint my mind to be in 5 years, 10 years, what are you wearing when you walk in to talk to the CEO of Adidas or any company?
Actually, 2 days ago, I purchased a shirt that I think is about that future.
Is it your first shirt?
It's the first shirt I've ever owned. No, but I totally hear what you're saying, right? I think it's about kind of like not this acting as if stuff, just this being your best self kind of thing and living up to that. But at the same time, I think authenticity is one of these kind of things that you either have it or you don't. And a lot of us feel like we have to do the more cookie cutter thing.
Well, it just seems so binary, So sometimes I come up against this where, I'm 3 years out of the corporate life. I'm going to work with a young executive team today. Do I dress more corporate, like the wise elder, or do I dress in my typical style, which I call business magical?
There you go. I love that.
I tend to defer.
Of course you do.
Right. I curate as well.
Yeah.
We have that
Good.
in common.
I know that.
But that's typically where I default to. I'm like, I got to default to being me. I'm always fascinated by people that are ambassadors in two very distinct communities. And, and your work is a bridge between those two. So it's like, how do you roll when you...
No, totally. And I think there's this other piece to who I am that I also take pride in, which is this kind of chameleon factor, which is that I feel really comfortable relating to all different kinds of folks. Yeah. I think that has to do with, my personal history, having parents from other sides of the world that met in a third part of the world.
You're a professional friend maker.
I like humans, and like, I don't tend to put up, walls as far as that stuff. But, it's, I think part of the kind of hidden upside to this glowing in the dark, like being yourself, not doing the cookie cutter thing, is that really when we do that, I'm convinced that we create space for others to do the same.
You give everyone permission. You kind of transcend
it's
the
just
judgment.
That flyer freak flag, and other people will too. And there's nothing, we've all seen people who are like, all right, their freak flag's a little crazy, man. Like, maybe chill out with that.
I get that a lot.
Yeah. It happens. And we all know what feels right for us, like what is actually us. And whatever that is, I think we need to be it, because I think it really is a gift that we give other people. Sometimes folks who maybe didn't have that platform of love to build on, or maybe who are a little more anxious about how they connect with the outside world. But I really think all of us have that kind of uniqueness that other folks can't help but be attracted to, because it's about just being okay with who you are. And, being a human is kind of an ongoing process of figuring that all out. But
or for you, it's, the creative people, it's like one big artistic exercise and experiment.
Totally. I think art exists in everything. Like, it's not just painting or music or sculptures. I think there's super creative teachers, super creative logistics companies like we were just talking about, right? There's all kinds of way to innovate and create new paths forward. I think regardless of medium or profession, that's art.
When you experience your curated, and I want to be careful like how we use it here, because when I say your life is curated, there's, back in the 50s when, a particular housewife might curate her life, it's like, I'm going to take speed in private and I'm going to put out the commemorative rooster collection and the wall of thimbles and the precious moments. And like, there was like that kind of curation.
Sure.
But what I find so fascinating about you and your amazing wife, Lindsay, and what you've built is the high degree of intentionality to visually display your values.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of rock and roll. There's a lot of weird. Yeah. There's a lot of, it is so hyper technicolor. Yeah. But not not in a gaudy way, but in just a, like permission to glow, permission to have the full spectrum, that kind of thing. And it carries on beyond, the walls of the space and your personalities, but it's like, it's in the food. For sure. It's how your kids are. Yeah. It's, and I'm seeing it now show up in like your diverse palette of clients.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, no, definitely. So
how does that work? Like, how does somebody create that? Like, where do you start with that?
Yeah, no, I honestly, it's kind of one of those inherent things. I don't know how like logistical or kind of this is the system for it that I could even lay out, because it feels like just something that we do, that I do, that Lindsay and I have done together. And for me, it's kind of like there's so many options, right? Like relationships with artists, cool creative people doing stuff. So there are too many options for what could go on that one piece of wall in my condo, right? So I'm actually in a little phase of moving things around these days. I'm like, oh God, what are we going to, I have too much stuff. Lindsay's got to make me put this stuff away, right? But no, I mean, I think it's really just, it really just comes back to being okay with liking what you like understanding that you can't please everyone. And like, even if you had said like, yeah, dude, your apartment is kind of over the top and gaudy and I can't, like, it's making me spin, like that would just not be the right vibe for you. And I think there's even this room where, like, especially in a very kind of consumerist society where people's choices are kind of like products. So we kind of think like, oh, they've chosen that product, I'm different from them in this way. Or we think differently about that. When really it's like, whoa, like hold up from that. Just appreciate that someone does it that way. Like my aesthetic isn't this super clean, minimal Crate and Barrel vibe, but that's an awesome vibe, right? There's some people who that is their vibe. And that's this kind of piece where we all are going to curate our lives in a way that feels right for us. But I think a lot of us sometimes can get caught up in the minutia of difference or the gradation of color and like, oh, that's not for me, I don't like that. But it's I think there's an in-between kind of space who can say that's not for me, but I'm really excited that it's there.
What do you do, or how do you handle when you run into the critic or the person who knows more, they think they know more than they do, like that person?
Honestly, I kind of, for the most part, there's not a ton of convincing folks like that. I think there's very kind of prescriptivist, like this is the only thing that is okay to like type approaches, whether it's art or music or anything else. I'm not speaking to those folks. I think largely, I think there's a big piece of this that I know there's a kind of thread in me that just really wants to be liked by everyone. And both as a business executive and just kind of as part of growing up, I think I've become more and more aware that you're not going to win over everyone, and that's all right. And in fact, it'd be super exhausting if the mission was to win everybody over.
Yeah. Oh, trust me. Right? I butt up against it all the time. My wife.
It's tough, man. Especially when you're as social as I think guys like you and I are. It's like, yeah, we want this to go well, this interaction.
Even in phases of my marriage where we went to therapy, like couples therapy, my wife would say, I can't really hang with you in couples therapy because you're just on a mission. You're on a campaign to get the therapist to love you. She's like,
I love it.
She's like, and it works. She's like, you're so good at it that the therapist is like, tell me more, Casey. Oh,
Funny.
wow. Is she being
That's
mean
super
to you or
funny.
whatever? And I'm like, am I doing that thing? That's so messed up. Like, but yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no. And I mean, I think honestly, like we're humans, we're social. Like it makes sense that there's that desire for acceptance or like connection. And I definitely feel that. But yeah, I think as far as the people who are very kind of it's fundamentalism when you're saying there's only one right way to do this thing. And I think it's really interesting, especially like folks who maybe are on the social and political left who just think they've dominated the truth in one particular aspect. There's more to unpack there as well.
Well, there becomes very hard lines about what woke means and what this means, what that. And I do believe in our culture right now, we're getting very...
Being awake is good.
Totally. I mean, obviously, it's what the show's about. Like
Sure.
my life,
100%,
my life
man.
and work are dedicated to it.
Totally.
And delusion is everywhere, and you could easily get deluded into thinking that you're more woke than so-and-so because of this and that, and look for every reason to be outraged at all times. That's the other like cultural
100%.
trigger right now.
Yeah.
And I get that it's an indicator of the wound that is happening, and definitely in more pronounced in communities that you and I, our privilege does not allow us to participate in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you come up, I wanted to ask about critics because, I look at you and I as possibility junkies.
100%.
Like I see everything and this and that and razzle dazzle sparkle.
Sure.
But when you run up against somebody who just like stops and just is dug in and says like, this sucks, that sucks. Nope. I once played in a band I was in a ska band, and I kept my box of CDs. This was before MP3 players. I had a box of CDs I traveled with in the tour bus.
Nice.
And I found our drummer going through my CDs, and he was like, George Michael, why do you have a George Michael CD? This is a ska band. This is a rock and roll band. He's like, and by the way, stop bringing your stupid acoustic guitar. It's taking up room. Like, you're going to sing Kumbaya. Like, it was just such this visceral attack on like what I thought. And, I think collectively as a human species, we upgraded George Michael from guilty pleasure to pleasure upon his passing. Yeah. But in my family, far before that, we had elevated him to his proper stature. I mean, the guy's voice was butter. I didn't need to justify. But I like. There's something very cool about and kind of disarming about somebody like you and that is so in touch with their own style and in touch with their own vision and lives that, but also gives people permission to like what they like. Like there's zero judgment here. You can't get it wrong. You want a picture of the rooster, you get it. You want
100%
something more like Red Roof Inn vibe, you get it.
And here's the thing, man. I think the kind of dirty secret is that a lot of that kind of prescriptive, more fundamental, this is the only way, this is the only thing that is good, is really, I think, about people searching for what they think authenticity is. That shit that you were just talking about, the ska dude being like, yeah, no acoustic guitars and no George Michael and all that. Like, how many dudes leading punk bands have you heard that exact same thing from? It's not punk enough. And so that's a variable. We could shift that into any kind of thing, right? Cooking, travel, anything. And people are going to say, this is the only way that is. And I think it's not only about searching for that authenticity, but the fact that in a lot of sectors, environments, professional circles, like that cachet is marketable. Like really kind of on the sly, people are saying, I'm the only person to be asked about this and I'm preserving my price point. I think the same thing happens with all this like digital technology. Now an iPhone XS Max has better specs than a $5,000 DSLR. So the world changes, things change. People, that world is flattening. People are still telling you the only good photo you can take is with a $6,000 camera that they bought, are full of shit, right? And the only reason they're saying that is because it preserves their role in that hierarchy, right? So I'm all about tools. Give everybody the tools, let everyone try. Let everyone see, let people ask questions, even the question that people think shouldn't be asked about this, whatever this is. And I'm I think people and communities and engagement create much better solutions than just kind of being pontificated from some other space. And I'm just someone who likes knocking down rules and barriers, and this is the only way it's done type logic.
So from a place of possibility, think about 5 years into the future.
Wow.
You have far expanded and exceeded all goals and expectations. What would the dream client or installation be to take as much of your current gallery at the time or collection into an astonishing number of spaces? Like, what would that look like?
You know, it's interesting because like over the course of the organization's work, we've kind of set these different goals that in retrospect have been super helpful.
Goals are good.
They're pretty rad.
For a business.
Yeah.
Business,
what are we
not
trying to do here? Right. So, I mean, for us, really wanting to make art accessible in all communities, that was kind of easy. Chicago is divided up into 50 wards, a very Chicago thing, a ward. And just that putting art in every neighborhood of the city, every ward of the city was the best way to represent that we wanted art to be accessible to all communities, right? And as we kind of like double back and think about working with various schools or parks or libraries, and I think probably as far as this goal or like 5 years from now, I'll kind of focus on the community piece because that's what I think, at least for me personally, just lights me up, is thinking about really our collection is at over 1,100 pieces right now of limited edition prints. And I think the goal would be to have, upwards of 90% of it on display in those schools. Now we probably have half of the collection on display between our corporate clients and our community spaces, and really kind of unleashing that even farther would be, about getting it to the point where we've been able to put art in every school in the city. So as we come full circle, we finish with isms. And isms are little snapshot pieces of insight or wisdom you would offer a particular person. Okay. So these are called, should we call them Evanisms or La Ruffa-isms? I think Evanisms. Let's go with Evanisms.
It flows better.
Yeah, it does.
So these are some Evanisms. For what piece of insight or wisdom would you offer an aspiring entrepreneur? Or specifically a purpose-based or a community-based entrepreneur? I think there's a book, it's called Feck Perfection by James Victori. And I recently came across it and haven't been able to put it down. And I'll just steal, it's not an Evanism, it's a James Victori-ism, but Feck Perfection, man. I think a lot of us are worried about whether or not it's perfect. And it's not. It's just not. And I think that creates situations where we don't get enough feedback and we don't let the thing sink or swim. And we don't get the kind of critical feedback that could kind of elevate it closer to perfect. And so actually reading his book has been hugely inspirational as a business leader, but definitely as a creative person. And I think as an entrepreneur, if you're scared to test stuff, you're in the wrong game, So test stuff, break stuff, try again. It's not perfect. It won't be. But that's why we're out here. One piece of insight or wisdom you would offer a tatted up business visionary who wanted to engage corporate audiences? Don't wear sandals. Right. Don't wear the sandals. Or mandals. No, 100%. Yeah, I think as far as maybe being a little far out and advancing in business, I think, really first just show up on time. Yeah, right. Just fucking be on time. I'm sorry I was late to this, by the way. Yeah, man, what the hell? No, but you know what I mean? I think there's if you're going to be a professional and if you're going to be the far out one, right, then don't be late. Don't give them all the reasons that they've already got queued up to say you're nothing, or that this ain't worth doing, or that we're not taking a chance on this guy. And I think just basic handling your business things, right? Showing up on time, responding to the emails, the professional side of stuff.
And I think as long as that happens, that just kind of conveys the sense of respect of people's time and energy that gets you to the place where people are listening and watching for how your far outness resonates in them.
I love that.
Right?
It brings up for me that some people that are so dug into, this is how I am, take me or leave me. I'm being me, and I want to sell to a corporate audience, whatever. Yeah. All of that is built on the faulty premise that there aren't incredibly creative, hip, badass, 100%. Woke, spiritual people here working.
I agree.
They might wear whatever clothes, and you'd probably be surprised what they do get away with in corporate these days. But, sure. But like, you're assuming that you, that they don't have something to teach you. It's back to that kind of fundamentalist, purist one right way thing.
Definitely. I think it also is about the kind of piece we touched on about people being like, this is Eureka. People like doing things for each other, right? As far as millennials care about the greater good. What does that mean? I think that the kind of micro interpersonal piece of that is like, no one wants to be judged before they've met you.
Yeah, right. You don't want them to judge you.
What's the first thing that makes you go fuck off to whoever it is?
Yeah,
is when they think they've got you so pegged that they're already saying my way or the highway.
Yeah,
on this whole shit.
Yeah.
It's like, you're that's the beginning of the end right there, right?
So why would you bring that into the space?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think unabashed can take various hues, right? Like unabashed can lean one way and feel empowering and collective and inspirational, and unabashed in a like, it's my way and I don't care what your perspective is a whole different way to come at it, right? I think all of us just in a very essential way just want to feel like we have a chance, feel like we're being acknowledged that we're okay how we are, and kind of any microaggression that is again probably more about an effort and people's insecurities around validating themselves in a space really kind of throw up more walls than are necessary. So yeah, I mean, I think I generally smile a lot naturally anyway. It's what I like to do. So that pairs well with far out.
Yeah, being a uniter or being a human, engaging other humans.
And seeing a softness in that, right? Like in a previous life, I did outreach for a consumer advocacy organization, which meant driving all over Illinois to little senior centers and public libraries where I would talk to grannies about how to not let, the telecom companies rob them out of their medication money, right? And every chance I had to sit across from a granny with all my tattoos and just be soft and sweet with her, man, that's winning.
It is.
That's that good stuff.
They don't see it coming. I mean? They don't see it coming.
Man, it's a cool mix. It's at least it's my mix. So
final Evanism. What one piece of wisdom or insight would you offer the modern father or dad?
It's interesting because I have a lot of dads around me like yourself that I totally look up to, and I've had the huge advantage of being able to take notes from you guys. I think, it's still just a big thing in our culture, no matter, how much of a modern man you are, that I still think way too many dads think earning their paycheck is all they got to do. And
on our worst days, I mean, it triggers us sometimes when we're like that provider instinct comes up sometimes.
I mean, it's there for a reason, right? And it's not about neglecting it. I mean, and hell, let's keep doing this tomorrow because we want to keep providing for our families.
We need to live well, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think I still kind of see it way more than I would like to, quite frankly, and I think this happens just even probably with men in their relationships with their wives and girlfriends, just absolving oneself of an entire range of participation with our significant others or our children, because the breadwinning, whether conscious or subconscious, to us feels like we've done our part here. And so, to any dads who are kicking ass at work, are doing really important work, maybe they're the only breadwinner for the family, maybe they're not, but just that kind of like the size of your paycheck will never take the place of eye contact and open dialogue and physical touch and all these different things that make a relationship between a father and a child special. So there's just the paycheck isn't enough, man. It just really isn't. And at the end of the day, I know some kids who are rich kids whose dads earn plenty of money, for whom I can tell, see, feel, intuit a certain level of like, who the fuck are you, man? You're just a paycheck. As far as how the kid relates to the dad, because the dad isn't involved in that, in any of the other stuff. And so, for the better, I think what being a man and being a father is changing rapidly. Maybe not as fast as it should, but still in like an aggressive, good way. I think we're moving in the right direction.
It's changing. I mean, my grandfather, who is my hero, had 6 kids and changed not one diaper his entire life. I mean, can you imagine that era?
I really cannot.
Not at all. Not at all. Your wife's
Guess what my wife wouldn't stand for.
Seriously.
Sure. And that's okay. I think there's a level of, we all have men in our histories who were more prototypical. That's just the way the past works, right? But one thing, I think aside from any kind of platitudes about life-work balance, I think the reality is that life is multifaceted, and then we got to show up for those various facets. And that, I encourage dads to maybe play hooky that Friday and go to the ball game with the kid instead. Yeah,
we got to pick up another conversation around your integrated schedule design. It's one of the things I'm the most proud of that we created. Not that we only created, but got you to surrender into and like fully enjoy. Because there is that guilt of like, oh, I could be generating this or 100%. That. But the pictures you guys post from the beach and the thing, I mean, you literally get to live and work on vacation.
We try to. We feel like we're doing all right when we set things up that way. But I think especially, when the kids are young, just that, and I think this is a lot how it really applies to how I'm thinking outside of fatherhood too, which is just that time is the most valuable currency, and like my kids are 3 and 1, like they're going to be in school all day, every day pretty soon. And there's going to be no hanging out on Wednesdays and Fridays like I do with them now. I'm going to have to take my ass to work. So that's that other piece, trying to be intentional about like the phases of life and like when it makes sense to go about things in certain ways. So I think time's hugely valuable.
Well, Evan, I really appreciate your isms and your style and your mad mojo. And if I may further acknowledge you, thank you for being just a great example.
Thanks, man.
Of a dad who gets to be an artist everywhere and to connect so many other people to their own artist and their own curator.
I appreciate that, dude.
Yeah, thank you.
Means a lot.
Yeah, man.
It's fun to do.
Thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to all of you for spending time with us. To learn more about anything we discussed today, please head on over to thisepiclife.com for all show notes. We'd really appreciate a review on iTunes, and your feedback is always helpful, so please pop on over to iTunes and leave a review. And also, please get in touch. My email is kc@thisepiclife.com. You could also find us on Facebook and Twitter at This Epic Life.